Good afternoon from Israel, from Galilee. In fact, behind me, right here, is the Valley of Armageddon. This is where I live. I live right by the Valley of Armageddon. And I would like to update you all on a very important issue that happened over the last few hours that I believe is with a great significance here in the region. And again, I think it's very symbolic to report on those type of things with the Valley of Armageddon right behind me. So what happened is that Russia just suspended the nuclear agreement that it had with the United States of America that was signed in the year 2000, by which both sides actually are to destroy each 35 tons or 34 tons each of plutonium, which is obviously to make nuclear bombs. The Russians, out of the blue, are claiming that the U.S. is not keeping its part of the deal. Obviously, it has really nothing to do with that. This is the growing tension in the Middle East, and it all has to do with Syria and with the American deployment of anti-missile defense system in Romania. And so what the Russians did in the last few hours, they made two moves, and both moves are quite interesting. The first one, they suspended the implementation of that agreement, which means that Russia is keeping to itself the right not to destroy plutonium, and God knows what he's going to do with it. We see already that tension is rising even in the nuclear, I would say, environment of both countries. Such rhetorics between the two countries has not been heard since the end of the Cold War. And I believe that what we're watching right now, it's even beyond what was there in the Cold War. But the second thing that Russia did over the last less than 24 hours, I would like to inform you that in order to stop any U.S. intervention in Syria, Russia just placed in Syria an important defense system against cruise missiles and in some aircrafts. Now, why is Russia doing that? First of all, Russia is placing the SA-23. This is the first time ever the SA-23 defense system, which is two different rockets that are being launched once it detects a flying cruise missile towards its target. The first one that is flying towards the cruise missile that is coming towards us, the small one is called the Gladiator, and the large one is called the Giant. Now, each and every one of them contains more than 130 kilograms of explosive, and it's supposed to destroy the cruise missile on its route to its target. Now, why this is a very important thing? For two reasons. One, the Russians are telling the Americans, if you're even thinking about striking in Syria, then you better think twice. The only option of America to strike in Syria right now, the only one, is the option of sending cruise missiles from the Mediterranean using the 6th Fleet of the U.S. Navy. Several of those ships are right now off the shores of the Mediterranean. And the Americans are obviously keeping that right to themselves, but the Russians understand that if America is going to do that, we better secure their failure by having this SA-23 system deployed for the first time ever. That system, which is kind of new, crossed the border of Russia into a foreign country. So we have that, and we also have the Russian threat to America that if they will intervene or do anything in the Middle East, in particular in Syria, it will be an earthquake. And I repeat that, it will be an earthquake. Now, apart from the fact that we are watching increasing number of earthquakes and dangers of earthquakes in America and other parts of the world, Russia is not talking about a real earthquake. Russia is talking about a potential military confrontation between America and Russia. Make no mistake, the Russians in the next few days are having a drill. Millions of Russians are going to go down to bomb shelters and assimilate an attack on Russia. And we're used to those things here in Israel. We do it once or twice a year as a country. But for the Russians, this is quite unique. So the Russians are preparing their own people for something, and the Russians are preparing the ground in Syria for something, and the Russians are threatening the Americans with something. Now, it's important because once that type of system is deployed right there in Syria, it's not only going to prevent US cruise missiles from flying all the way into their targets, but it's also going to somehow hinder the Israeli efforts to target Syrian storage of weapons that are being smuggled all the way to Hezbollah. Ladies and gentlemen, the Russians are making in the last 24 hours a move that is even worse than their own physical entrance into Syria. They are bringing into Syria what we call a game-changing weapon right now. It is actually going to deter Israel from being able to move in Syria. It is going to stop the Americans from even thinking about sending any cruise missiles. And it is going to send a message that from now on, not only that they are going to operate in defiance to US and European countries, but they are going to actually become aggressive, and they will attack anyone that is harming their interest in Syria. This is a huge thing. The Russians are preparing themselves, they're preparing the ground, they're preparing the world, they're preparing America, they're preparing the UN, and they're also preparing the Europeans, that they're about to do something. I think it's very interesting that behind me, the Valley of Armageddon, I believe that, of course, according to Revelation 16:16, this will be the place where they will gather their forces as they will move toward Jerusalem for the final war. Now, this war will be just when the saints are not here. This is part of the end of the Great Tribulation. This is the war that Jesus will come back and put an end to, and we will come back with him. But this is going to be a very serious one, and we can see how the world is indeed getting ready to it. So behind me, it's now the peaceful Valley of Armageddon, but it's not going to be staying peaceful for too long. Israel is safe, Israel is secure, Israel is prosperous like never before, probably. In fact, at the eve of the new year here in Israel, they have released many different polls. 83% of the Israelis are more than happy to live here, and more of those feel very secure in this country. Most Israelis have more than ever before financially, and Israel is doing good. And this is exactly what Ezekiel promised that will be in the land prior to the attack of Gog, the prince of Magog. I said before, I believe Putin is indeed Gog, the prince of Magog. I believe it's going to come from Russia. I believe the Russians are dictating what's going on in the Middle East. They are calling the shots right now. They are making the threats. They are not only threatening, but they are moving weapons and doing interesting things here. Keep your eyes high above, because our redemption indeed is drawing near. Again, behind me is the Valley of Armageddon. I live right by here. I'm not planning on being here for the tribulation. I'm not even planning on being here for that battle. Maybe I'll rent my porch right here for the CNN to cover it. I'm not sure. Maybe we can make some money on them. But one thing is for sure, I know that for us the believers, that which is going on right now is a great source of encouragement. For the non-believers, I believe, as I said before, Bible prophecy is not to scare, but it's to prepare. But if you're not prepared, you better be scared. Very bad things are at the horizon. So tribulations, are at the horizons, as I promised, or as I reported before. But the last 24 hours, one more giant step was made by the Russians. And do not ever neglect that, because they are calling the shots right now here in this area. I'd like to bless you again with the Shana Tova, Happy New Year, on behalf of my family, and to also pray that tomorrow, as I travel to the US for several conferences and then to Italy, I hope that you will join me in prayer that this is going to be a successful journey, a ministry tour, and many souls will be saved. Our aim at Behold Israel Ministry is not really to just report news. You can watch news, you can read, you can read. There's tons of websites. Unfortunately, most of them are not accurate. Even those who call themselves Christians will report very, very wrong, and sometimes even, I don't even know where they get the information from, some sort of fantasy or something, which unfortunately makes all of us look bad, those who report on current events and those who speak and teach on Bible prophecy. So you have to stick to the truth. You have to, I live here. I live in this country. I know what is going on here. I live right by this valley behind me, the Valley of Armageddon. I'm not just reading the news, or I'm not just watching the news. I live the news right here in this country. So I count myself, I hope, as a very reliable source of information. If you don't have our app, get our app, Behold Israel, on the App Store, because you will get news reports on push notifications every day. Also, log on to our website, Twitter, and our Instagram, Behold Israel. That's what it's all about, to stay updated on what is going on. I love you all. God bless you. And shalom from the Valley of Armageddon, from the depth of the